2022 was the year our sovereign Queen Elizabeth II died. This is what happened next.
This is BBC News from London. Buckingham Palace has announced the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II.
From across the United Kingdom and around the globe, they came and they waited and they queued. All for this, a fleeting but significant moment, a chance to say goodbye not just to a monarch, but to a woman who meant so much to so many.
She had compassion, empathy, forgiveness and love. And I think that has given more to the world than anything. If only other leaders could be that way, wouldn't we live in a wonderful place?
It was amazing. I wouldn't have missed it. It was worth waiting 11 hours.
Oh, God, I hate it. Oh, look, it's going everywhere. Hang on. So nobody got shot. What is that? Oh, look, it's everywhere. Up there, there's bloody thing. What they do, everyone's stinking.
I think what I found just very cynical about the whole exercise was the queue, which was obviously used to try and browbeat the nation into thinking that there's this mass outbreak of huge mourning. I'm not saying, there were obviously people who were sad, including people who aren't for the monarchist, partly because she was around for a long time. I get that. And, you should never obviously relish someone's death unless they're a monster. But I think, the queue, it was 200,000 people in the end. That's what the figure we came up with was, which you wouldn't have thought from the broadcast coverage. And obviously what they did, given there was huge amounts of time to prepare for the Queen's death, is they could have had a ticketing system so people didn't have to wait for hours. But they didn't want that to happen because that wouldn't have the same optics. They wanted the optics of a nation so convulsed with mourning that people have to wait for hours in order to pass by the Queen's coffin. I don't actually think it was the mass grief that you would have seen with previous monarchs, particularly previous long-running monarchs. Enthusiasm for the monarchy has subsided and waned in this country. It's much less amongst younger people than amongst older people. Every generation has less enthusiasm. So I haven't changed my view, which is the monarchy's days are numbered. I think that will take a while, but I don't think in 100 years Britain will be a monarchy. And I think the proof was partly in the response to the Queen's death. It wasn't the mass outpouring that you might have expected from a Queen who was generally well regarded, actually, by most of the population. No one really disliked the Queen, and had been around for so long. I think they should be worried, actually.
Yeah, I suppose I have a slightly different take on the queue to you. I mean, obviously, I accept it's cynical. I think they knew that was going to happen. They wanted to have a queue because they wanted to sort of demonstrate an outpouring of grief. I went to Buckingham Palace to sort of see what was going on. It wasn't giving outpouring of grief. It was sort of giving people who were sort of quite interested to play a part in history. From sort of the vox pops you hear of people in the queue, and it sort of makes sense to me. It was the queue itself, not the seeing the Queen lying in state, that people will find so memorable. So you had all of these people saying, this is the best 11 hours of my life. I've made so many friends. People kind of like to be part of a national event, and it's all the more sort of memorable and real, I think, if you have to suffer somewhat.
The polling showed what you just said, which is a lot of people were there because it's part of history. And I get that. So lots of people queue to Lenin's tomb in Moscow, and I don't think a lot of them are ardent Leninists. They're just quite interested in history. He was a very consequential figure, and they want to go and see his mausoleum. I would say probably the majority of people who queued obviously were pretty supportive of the monarchy, but it's just such a small slither of the population, 200,000. And to be honest, a lot of them were tourists and people from visiting and so on. I just don't think it should. All I'm saying is I'm not having a go at the people who got involved. I think, I know people who went in the queue. Fine. I hope you had a great time. All felt part of something. I think there's nothing wrong with wanting to feel part of something. I just don't think it should be held up as evidence of monarchist fervour. That's the problem I have, because support for the monarchy has dwindled in this country. At the last, the Queen's dad, more people turned out and the population was lower. And also if we're going to, it's probably harder for people back then because of travel costs and also, less people, more people doing 9-to-5 jobs than today. I'm just saying it doesn't bode well for the future of the monarchy. I don't think it showed massive enthusiasm.